participate online. Some students didn't come into the sessions at times. So we have a lot of gaps is what I'm trying to say. And so we had those gaps even last year when we went into the pandemic and we didn't come back, into the building when we went into spring break. And so this is kind of where this came into place. So we're, talking about how do we address the needs of all of our students in math. And so we do that through tiered stations. And I'll explain how that works. And again, this is kind of our interpretation of differentiation. There's a lot of ways to do it. Actually, I saw somebody presenting on tiering and reading, and it's our instructional coach for our reading language arts instructional coach. I saw her present on that, and it gave me an idea for math because I hadn't seen anything done for math like that. And so I knew our kids had those needs even more because in math, you have a lot of gaps, especially. And if you don't fill those gaps, students struggle and they continue to struggle. And so, again, I'm just going to kind of go into the background. We do have a lot of learning loss. And so this is an article that we shared with our staff at the beginning of the year, and it talked about how do we fill those gaps. That's what I liked about this article. It went into great detail about it. And one of the things it says is, yes, we do need to go back and teach some of those skills that they didn't get from previous grade levels. And the thing about it is we can't go and teach everything. And so it says, to be very strategic about what we're presenting to our kids. And so this was a great article to kind of set the context and the foundation to what we're going to be doing for the rest of the year at my campus. And so then we said pretty much, what does that mean? We have to meet, students where they're at. And a lot of the times I shared that with teachers. When I was in the classroom, a lot of people would tell me that, differentiate. But I wasn't ever shown what it looked like. And so I hope to give you an example of what it could look like. But again, this is our interpretation of it. There's a lot of ways to do it. It's always, telling us, you can do this, you can differentiate by content, process, or product, but I never saw an example of what it looked like. So I hope to share that with you today. And so that's what we talked about. How do you differentiate? How do you fill the gaps? And so this is what I'm going to be showing you. We do that through our station rotations with our students. Of course, we do that through our tier 1 in our whole group. We try and go, we pre-assess to look to see what kind of foundational skills we need to, front load for the kids before we start with our units. But then we do it through our stations, like I said. And so we try to align with reading. We have, these are the main parts of our stations, but of course, anything is up for teachers to be able to change. But some of them are things that we do as a campus, and this is something that is expected, the tiered part. So of course, we have our guided math. The teachers would then work on whatever activity that students are working on it at their tier. It'll make sense once I share with you the activities. Then they also have, when they're on their own, they go into a digital content station. The lower grades, it's not really digital, it's more hands-on. I'll share with you an example of that in a bit, but those are tiered based on where the students are at. Then they have independent practice. The teachers can put in whatever they feel the kids need, whatever they need to get spiraled in. And then of course we have our adaptive software with Imagine Math and Reflex Math. And so the tiering comes in because we have students with a lot of gaps, and we do everything based on data. And so if we have students who have needs, we can't just simply give them an activity with no scaffolding and no support. And so we provide that scaffolding and support through our activities. And so where do we start? We usually look at the data, of course. I'm just going to kind of go through this really quick. We start at the beginning of the year with our Imagine Math data, and depending on where the kids, land, they're tiered. That's just a starting point. We see what quantile they fall in, whatever tier they're on, then we kind of have a plan. If they're in tier 3, they have to have a certain amount of minutes, lessons passed, and how many times you're supposed to meet with them. So if you're at tier 3, you meet with the students more. If you're at tier 1, you still need to meet with them because all students need to grow, but you're going to meet with them less, maybe once a week. And so what concepts and interventions do we provide to the kids based on the data? We have to look at the data. Imagine Math, we can use it, but to me, it's a little bit limited. We then start to get our checkpoints, our unit assessments, and we look at our Eduphoria reports to be able to look at how the kids performed. Then we go into the reports that are available. We use the Student Learning Standard Breakdown Report to see areas of need. So anything that we've been typically told, 65% and below would be a whole class concern. So something you would, traditionally do like a whole class reteach. And obviously we don't have the time to do that anymore because of the gaps that we have, and we're trying to fill those gaps. So we don't have a lot of time to go back and teach things whole class. So we're going to do that through our stations. And so we also use the student's individual response report to get information about the student miscues. And I'll go into a little more depth on that. So again, this is a report we use. It's the Student Learning Standard Breakdown Report. And this is one just from this year I wanted to share. And so this was one that we had for fourth grade. So what we do is we look to see for readiness standards. So of course, anything that an R would be a readiness standard. And then we look for anything that's below a 65. So on this report, you can see that there are 3 areas that are below the 65%. And so what are our next steps? Because we can't fix everything. We try to fix one thing at a time and then we move on. It's impossible to do everything all at the same time. So then we look at our oh my goodness, I lost my train of thought, but we look at the frequency. There we go. We look at the frequency distribution and we decide which standard is going to help our students be more successful. Obviously, it's going to be the standard where they're going to have more questions on their STAR test. So we use that. So on the bottom, I kind of put a little bit of the thinking behind it. 4.4a is tested, 6 times within the last 5 years. So it was tested twice on last year's 2021 test. That's adding and subtracting the whole numbers and decimals. Then we get into 4.4H. That was tested 8 times within the last 5 years, 5 times just last year, because that includes multiplication and division of whole numbers. So that's a huge one. And then 4.5A was tested, I skipped that, but I want to say it was 6 times within the last year or 5, and it was only tested 1 time last year. So just based on this data, 4.4H would be where we would start. That's where we're going to start, and that's how we're going to help build our kids. But then, that comes the next step. What are we going to work on with our kids? But what we do next, though, is we then decide to tier our kids. So if I'm going to use 4.4H here, I would then go into the student view of this same report, the Student Learning Standard Breakdown. So I would go into that student view, and I would see how my students did individually on 4.4H. And then we tier them based on that. So we could see how the different students perform. So let's say, for example, I had students who had zeros, 50s or 75s and hundreds, or sometimes not hundreds because it's in the red. I would then tier them. My zeros could be my tier 3s, my 50s, depending on the score, could be my tier 2. My 75% could be my tier 1 students. And so we tier them based off of this report on the student view, just on that one skill of what we're going to be working on. So like I said, we then tier our kids based on that criteria for that one skill that we're working on, that 4.4H. And so this is just an example, made up names. Depending on your data, we might have 2 tier 2 groups depending on the size, or you might have 2 tier 3 groups depending on how the data came out. And you would put your tier 1 students there. So we tier our students again based on that skill 4.4H or whatever skill we decide to work on. If I'm going too fast, please let me know. We then also go into this report, the individual response report, because we want to be laser focused in our interventions with the kids. So if we go into the student individual response report, we can then see, okay, looking at that one standard 4.4H, are there multiple questions with 4.4H? Were they more successful with one versus the other? We can then really look at the student mistakes and understand where the gaps are. Is it computation? Is it they really don't have an idea of even where to start, or maybe they're getting the 1 step but not the 2 step? And so we can kind of start understanding where the mistakes are falling, and then we can develop a nice intervention that's going to address the needs of our kids. And it's not just something I go and look and find and do because it's there. It's something that's going to help my students. So just to kind of go back, we do a data dig. That's kind of what our sheet looks like. We look at those standards. We analyze the test and the kids' actual test. We usually have the teachers bring a test where the students scored a little bit higher in the middle and students who scored on the lower end, and then we start analyzing those mistakes, and we can then make good, decisions and good observations about what the kids are doing. And so after that, we make a plan. What are we going to do now? Again, we also use this one. We use this TEAK scaffold because sometimes we think, looking at the student's assessment, maybe they're not even there yet at grade level. So we might have to go back and go down a grade level to provide that tier 3 support for our kids. And then we look at also this report, the frequency distribution, because we want to know which standards are going to help our kids more. What should we begin with? And then once we're ready and finished with that one, we move on to the next one. And so again, this is what it looks like, tier students based on set criteria. Again, that's going to be our one skill that we're working on, our one standard. We analyze the reports for areas of need, and then we have the students work on them during their stations, and then we also work with them in the small group. So here's kind of where the support comes in, because I can't just simply send my tier 3 students to work on a particular activity without support. They're going to struggle. That's why it's in the red. And so I'm going to be showing you examples of some of our activities we've created. And this is something we do. We were actually given a day recently, a half day for math, half day for reading, to create these tiered activities. We've stayed with teachers after school and worked with them. I've taken a tier. We kind of split the work. That's how we do it, to create the activities you're going to be seeing in a little bit. So we have the same components in reading that we do in math. We look at how it's tested on STAR. We always want to insert a video for the kids, and the video can be something we find on YouTube, or it can be a video that we've recorded ourselves for the kids to have some support on how they're supposed to do that activity. There's an anchor chart for support. There should be practice, and there's always an assessment, because we want to see if the kids mastered it. We don't want them to just simply do it and then they move on. So the idea is they're supposed to practice, take that assessment, and if they get a 70 or above on that assessment, they move on to the next tier. So my tier 3 are going to move up to my tier 2. Once they master that tier 3, then eventually you want them to, of course, move on to that tier 1, because that's on grade level. That's going to go to the depth and complexity of the TEK. And so once they master one tier, they move on to the next. Something we're starting this year also, our tier 1 students, they're working on their tier 1, but once they master the tier 1, what do they do? We're going to be incorporating, project-based learning for those kids to be working on while the other students are completing their tiers. Do I have any questions so far before I continue? Okay.
Yvonne, this is Miss Boyd. I have a quick question on that past slide that you just did.
Yes.
Is that your tier 1 when you're saying for those tiered stations where you said it's a video, an anchor chart, practice and assessment? That's their individual tiered stations?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'll be showing you an example right now.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of a lot of information, and sometimes I might go a little fast. So if I am going a little fast, please let me know. But I'll be showing you a few examples of actually something we just created for 3rd grade recently based on the data. Okay, and so the first one this is a recent one that we've made based off of our students and our conversations with the teachers we've had. This is a 3rd grade one. So after looking at our data, we saw that 3.5A was a need of our students. It's something that's highly tested. The students didn't do well on it. And so what that is representing 1- and 2-step problems. And so this is kind of the thinking behind it. After having conversations, we saw through the assessments, through the teacher's anecdotal notes, students are struggling just adding and subtracting even 2-digit numbers. So that's of course a 2nd grade standard, but we have 3rd graders not being able to do that. And so we said, okay, we need to have those kids, we need to fill that gap before we even move on to the 3-digit numbers. So we're working on that right now, but we're moving from the concrete to the abstract. Our tier 2 students, what they're working on is representing addition and subtraction problems, because that's the standard. They need to understand how to represent that addition or subtraction problem. Again, we're working with small numbers because this is where our kids are at overall. And then our tier 1 students, they're going to be representing and solving the word problem. So that's kind of how we've tiered it for the kids based on our observations and our conversations. And maybe your students are at a different level, but that's where our students are at right now. That's what we're seeing they need. So I'm going to just kind of get out of here so I can share those. So I had those ready so that it kind of opens up a little bit faster. So we can make them on any, let me go back. I think that's it. I kind of want to start from the beginning. I had those ready. We have the teachers make them on whatever they're more comfortable with. Some teachers want to make them on a slide because they're more comfortable with slides. Some teachers do them on a Nearpod. With our lower grade teachers, like I said, some of them are just starting on paper right now, and that's fine because our little ones do need to have their hands on something. And some of our upper grades also are doing paper. They're doing like a combination of both, and I'll explain that in just a little bit. So it starts with the objective for the kids, so they know this is what I'm supposed to be doing, this is what I'm reviewing, learning about. Then there's a video. So this video, I was in charge of this tier. So I did a screencastify video explaining to the kids what they're supposed to be doing so that they understand, because this is a tier 3 student. I can't just expect them to be able to do this. This is what they need help with. And I'll just play a little bit of my video.
We're going to be using place value discs to add 2-digit numbers, okay? And so these are 2-digit numbers. These are numbers that have 2 numbers or digits in them. So we are adding 29 plus 35. And we want to use place value discs to understand how do you solve these problems. Now, I'm going to go ahead and let these instructions up. What I need to do first, again, let's remember those numbers, is 29 plus 35. So I'm going to write that problem down. If you notice, again, remember, this problem is written horizontally. Horizontally means sideways, okay? I want to write my problem vertically, up and down. So I need to write the numbers 29 plus 35. So I'm going to get my writing tool. I'll use black. And I want to write, let's write it here. We're not going to be using the hundreds place, so I can do that here. I'm going to write 29 plus 35. I also could have written the number that's bigger on top. I would actually recommend that, but for right now, we're going to just build it like that. So I'm using my hundreds place to write because I know I'm not going to be using it since I'm only using 2-digit numbers. So what I have to do is I have to build these numbers. So I start with 29. So for example, in the number 29, I know that there are 9 ones. So I'm going to go ahead and put those on there. 1, 2.
Okay, so I'm going to stop there. So I'm just explaining to the kids, this is how you do it. And then they're going to have some practice. So I just started with the addition. So it tells them now we're going to practice. There's a little bit of an anchor chart in another way to show them how do you add those numbers. I got that one from STEM Scopes, and then they're going to practice. So now it's on their own. They have just a couple. And then we do the same thing for subtraction. And again, this is how I did it. I didn't have to do it, but I scaffolded for the kids where I just did the video on addition, video on subtraction again. This is the video explaining to them how to do the subtraction using the place value disc so they understand. They have that, you know, that conceptual understanding of how subtraction works, how does regrouping work, and it really does help the kids. And so they watch the video and then they just continue. So I just kind of wanted to flip through this so you can kind of see what would happen at the end. So now we don't do this in every grade level. Some grade levels just use the online. We've decided the kids do need practice with the paper pencil. So what they do now is, since they're tier 3, we have like a red folder and it has worksheets where they're doing more practice with what they did online. In the folder, we have anchor charts for them to refer to, again, for that support. And then once they finish, they complete, an assessment. And so we've decided to do Google Forms because it's easier and it grades it for them right away. So if the kids know I get a 70, I'm able to do this, I can move on to tier 2 and they go ahead and do that on their own. So that's our tier 3 activity. I don't know if anyone has any questions about the tier 3. This is going to be then, I should have started from the beginning. This is our tier, one of our teachers made this one. Like I said, what we do is we split the work. And so it has the same components I want you to see. I just forgot to flip it back. So we have the objective for the kids. This is the tier 2. And again, now they're going to move into, now I can solve these problems. How do I represent them? What does it look like? And so again, we have a video. This one she found online. It's an Education Galaxy video, but she found it on YouTube. And it matched perfectly with what they were doing. Then we have our anchor charts explaining to the kids. Again, this is something they learn, but again, they need the reinforcement. This is the reteach. How does the strip diagram work? We have our number line anchor chart. And then she even included a few more anchor charts on that, on her end. So then, of course, then the kids have practice. And now they have to solve using their writing tools. How do I represent, and she has the anchor chart up there for support. How do I represent, and it's simple numbers again, because this is what our kids needed to understand before they get to those larger ones. How do I represent 13 plus 8 on a number line? The way star is showing, because we saw star usually has like a flat line. They have the jumps too, but usually it can be flat. And so the kids are going to be drawing it here and practicing. Using the strip diagram also. So what happens, how do I represent this problem? 65 and 35. Those are my parts. I need to find the whole, so I'm going to be adding. And so they're just plugging that in to see how that works. And so that is pretty much, I want to say the tier 2, but at the end, you would see the same thing. So this is what she wrote. Grab the yellow folder and get a handout and work on it. So that's what they're going to do, get that yellow folder because they're tier 2, and then they would have to take that assessment to move on from there. Okay, and then the last one, this one is on slides. It's in Spanish, but we have the English version also. And so it's the same thing based on the kids' needs. We have the objective. This one's missing the video for some reason. It was taken out, but it was there. So I don't know if I deleted it or someone else did an accident, but we'll get it back in. So we have the anchor charts, same situation, even though, yes, they're tier 1. They can go back and look for the support as well, the review. And now we're looking at those word problems, and then we're representing them. We start with the number lines, and then we get into the strip diagrams, putting in the numbers. How does that go? What are my parts? What are my wholes? How do I identify that? My tier 3 students can't do this yet. They don't quite understand that. And so they need to first begin with that first step that we started with. And then they'd go to that tier 1 folder and do problems that are similar to what they're doing, and then they have an assessment. And so this would be the scaffolding behind it. So for us, it's just more than giving them something to do. It's more than, yes, the students, this is a need that all the students have, but it's providing the scaffolding for it. That's the most important thing, and that's what we need to do because the students were struggling with it. But that's kind of the thinking behind this one that we just created. Are there any questions about the 3rd grade one? It's a learning process at first. I'm not going to lie. This is something that I'm constantly rethinking, redoing. We did some of these last year, but we did them in a different way. I know usually what we did in math last year is we used them. It was a lot of virtual manipulatives we made, but it was more with the teacher guided. Now we're trying to put them in the stations with the guidance of the video so that we can do more and get through more. And so it's kind of how we've changed it a little bit, but more little by little you learn and you grow from that. So if I go back to
Ms. Castillo, how long would it take a student to go through this process?
Well, we usually have them, and our goal is to have them finish all the tiers in 3 weeks. That's our goal. So we try not to make them too long, but we kind of gauge how things are going. But we want to not take more than 3 weeks on one of these activities.
Thank you.
And at first, honestly, it takes a little while to get used to make, but once you get the hang of it, it's really fast. You just have to get used to the technology and creating things. But we get there. And like I said, we split the work. If it's just one of us doing it, it's going to be difficult. The way we do it with our departmentalized, I'm their partner. So we split it that way. So I kind of work with all the grade levels and we make them together. So they're not by themselves. We split the tiers in our upper grades as well.
Approximately how long did it take you to create the tiered slides?
The creation was not the longest part. The longest part was the thought process behind it, because we really had to think and see what our kids needed. Once we had that conversation, it took me maybe an hour to get that finished. Some people it takes longer because they're not quite comfortable with the technology yet. They can do it, just takes them longer. But once they get the hang of it, they move a little bit faster. It was just longer, like I said, to go through the data, talking about what they need. That's really where the time takes place. Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm going to show you a few more examples so you can see. This one's 5th grade. We have a lot of, I have a folder with a lot of different ones that we've made even from last year, but this is one we made this year. Now this one is not a readiness standard, it's a supporting, but this is something that we knew we needed from the beginning, and this is not based off of our assessment we just had. We're working on a new one right now. So I just wanted to share with you the same thought process we went behind. So this is our 5th grade. In 5th grade, you know, the students are supposed to multiply a 3-digit number by a 2-digit number. But after having these conversations, our students didn't know which operation to pick, first of all. Some of them, not everybody. Some of our students were not able to just multiply a 3-digit number by a 2-digit number, and then we had to scaffold backwards to 4th grade. And so this is kind of where we're at right now. So tier 3 is multiplying a 2-digit by a 2-digit using the area model. And so what's great about this one, and I can go back to that. This one I didn't have open. There's a lot of things already available on Nearpod. So that's one of the ones that we found one for that and we used it, but we just added to it. So this one, I'm just going to do a preview view. We found this one, but there was no video on there, but there was a lot of great practice. So it had the guiding question, like what are they working on? This is my objective. And so what they're doing here is something they would do in 4th grade. They're multiplying a 2 by 2-digit number using that area model. I'm just going to kind of skip through some of this. There's the video explaining how to do it, and then they get really like step-by-step guided practice. They start with 3 digits by 1 using the draw it, and then they have them check 1 by 1. So it goes up to then the 2 by 2. And then they have to practice the 2 by 2. And then theirs is similar to the 3rd grade. They have a worksheet to work on after they're finished so they can practice, you know, with a paper and a pencil. So that was our tier 3 for multiplication. Let me go back. Our tier 2 then goes into something similar. Now they're going to go to the next step, 3 by 2. Now that they have mastered that and they passed their assessment, they'll move to the 3 by 2. So this one was made. We didn't find anything for that. So again, we start with the video. We did find a video. It needs to be clipped. I just saw that's a little bit too long. But what I like about this is we're having them first start with a standard algorithm because they need to do that. They need to learn that. They just find the products of those, just something very simple. Then they're going to go back and check their work. Did you get them correct? Then after that, they practice using the area model. So it's kind of a continuation of the one you just saw so that they can practice that. And then at the end, they'll have a portion where they'll decide, okay, what was the best one for you to use? And so after, let's see. So then they're going to go, you know, find their folder, and then they're going to use the best method, that's going to work for them. And then our tier 1 is going to be more like kind of our 3rd grade one. We're going to analyze the word problem. We're going to figure out how do you represent that using the strip diagram and then solving it as well, because our students need that. And I'll just show that one real quick. So we're just talking about the GET strategy, which is a representational strategy. It's talking about a word problem structure. In every multiplication problem, you have your groups. You know, they talk about how many you have in each group and how many you need in total. And so they're going to practice that strategy. Talks to them about what they're going to be doing, and then they're going to have to be filling that information in for them. And it gives them a little sample of how they're going to do that. So that's the video part. Explains to them what they're going to be doing, and then it moves on into the assessment portion after they have their practice, and then they have some assessments, and then they go from there. I don't know if I'm rushing a little bit, if I'm kind of talking too fast. I just was worried about time, but I think we're doing really good on time. But this is what that one would look like. We are doing this with I'm just going to go back. We are doing this with every grade level. So I wanted to show you a first grade example, and how I don't have I was trying to find a teacher so I can get a folder, but I wasn't able to do it in time. In first grade, we have the same focus. We look at data. And so based on that data, we come up with what standard we want to work on. And so this one would be based off of 1.5F, determining the unknown whole number in addition and subtraction equation. And so this is something we actually made online, but we printed out the work, and I'll show you what that looks like for the kids to actually get their hands on counters and actually do it. And so a lot of our students in first grade that we have here, not a lot, I keep saying a lot, but it's not. It's a small group of students that we have here. We have some that don't even know their numbers. We had some students that are just starting school for the first time. They don't know their numbers, they don't know their value. And so that's an issue when they should be doing something like creating equivalent equations. So our tier 3 students are just working on number recognition. We had quite a few students this year coming from Juarez, and so they don't have that background with the number and the value. Maybe they didn't go to school, some of them, and so they need that support. Our tier 2 students, they're going to be solving for an unknown in the equation, which is what the standard calls for. While tier 1, they're going to create equivalent equations. So I kind of wanted you to see the thought process behind it, so I was going to show you the activities. So this would be one of the activities, and we created this ourselves. So this is the tier 3, and so they were worried about the kids just understanding and recognizing 1 through 20, the value. And so all they're doing here is they're writing the number down, practicing, because we had some students not being able to write the number. They're flipping it. A lot of students didn't do a lot of that practice last year, representing it on a number line, doing it with tally marks, and then also with the 10 frame. So they would use counters, but then they would also draw and record there. And so it's on a Jamboard, but like I said, the students are going to be, and it's the same thing for all the numbers, just for them to practice, but it's going to be something that we would print as a PDF, and we put that in a folder. Now, how do we offer the support to the kids, right, that don't have that that background or need that help with the numbers? They're not quite getting it yet. So something we're doing with the little ones is, yes, they can get on the computer, but it takes a really long time for them to open up the computer and find an assignment in Classroom. So what we've done is we've found videos on YouTube or whatever we wanted to do, and whatever related to what we are working on, and we make QR codes for the videos, and they have the QR codes on the folder so that the kids could then watch a video explaining the numbers. So like, for example, this one, I know the teacher that worked on that, she found a video of Sesame Street where they're going over some numbers and they're counting like, oh, 3 ducks, and they're having to stomp. And so that's what the kids need. The kids don't have that background. And so the video is there for the kids to watch that first before they work on this, because it's just going to be them practicing something maybe they don't understand. And so then the tier 2, this is what that would look like. So it's, again, we just print them. They're like mats. And so the kids are supposed to build. So they know I'm supposed to put 6 counters on there, and then again, there's a video that goes with it. I have 6 counters, and that's when I recorded also that they put like a little QR code of it. So they have 6 counters, and then they add whatever's left over to make the 10, so they know what's missing. And so it's just a lot of practice like this for them on tier 2 so that they can understand that. And again, there's always an assessment to see that they're ready to move on and up. And then our tier 1 students are doing this. It's a little bit different. So they want to know, making those equivalents. Okay, so 8 plus 2 is the same as 5 plus what number? So they can kind of see, the composing and the decomposing part of numbers. Those same 2 sentences mean the same number. And that's something our kids who are in tier 3 couldn't quite do just yet because they're not ready. They're not recognizing that number. And so these are the 3 examples I wanted to share with you today, but we do have a lot more. Some of them are, like I said, are works in progress. Some of them that we have from last year don't have the videos yet. Like I said, because some of the teachers were using them as their small group. We found great success with the tiering. Our students grew quite a bit. We did very well in that area with growth. The grade levels that we really started with first, we kind of trickled to other grade levels that worked on it, was 5th grade. 5th grade religiously, we started with them first, did the tiered stations, the tiered lessons, and their students really, really grew. We're looking at some of the kids that we had that even, our SPED students, our students who classically struggle, like some of those kids moved up even to the meets and the masters on STAR. And so we know that that helped a lot. We didn't have as many students, need that extra reinforcement through PASS because of those lessons. And the teachers attribute that, to helping them as well, in addition to what they're doing in the tier 1. But I mean, that's kind of it in a nutshell. And I don't know if anyone would like to ask questions about what they've seen. I know it was a little fast and a lot of information, but I'm going to stop presenting.
Ms. Valdez, you have a question?
Yes, I just wanted to, I guess, confirm that I'm understanding. You said that you stay, I guess, with this work for 3 weeks, more or less. And,
Yes.
and I'm assuming that the kids are just going, because you said they know to move on. So they know to move on to the next
Tier
work.
Yes.
So like the tier 3s would go to tier 2 work.
Yes.
And then the 2s to 1.
Yes.
And then the ones, I guess, if they pass that little quiz you were talking about, then they're more project based, or do they go on to some other need?
We do project based for now,
Okay.
just to make it
So
more
they
manageable.
They stay on the same teak, but now it's something with a project.
Yes. So this is
Okay.
just and again, this is just one of our stations. Not everything's tiered. That's impossible. That would be something that it's a little bit too much to ask of somebody to do. So that's why we just do the one station tiered, and then we go from there.
So what do you mean, like one for math? Like,
yeah, like for reading, like we have multiple stations. Only one of those stations is tiered. So like their independent station would not be tiered. That's a lot of work for one person to have to do. So that one tiered activity will help. It's like we know we have various needs based on even just the report I showed you earlier, but we're going to get better one thing at a time, and we're going to make sure they master it, and then we move on to the next one.
Right, that makes sense. Yep.
That's how
Okay, thank you.
I see another question. Yes, Ms. Nuanez.
You say you stay on this for 3 weeks, and I understand that because a lot of kids need, especially with addition, subtraction.
Yes.
But what about the other concepts you have to teach? Are you still in between those? You still going to your next concept?
Are you talking about like the stuff that comes in the units, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
this is not our whole group. This is just our station time.
Okay.
So, yeah, so we still have our whole group that we didn't touch. We need to still go with what our scope and sequence is telling us to do. This is just our station rotation.
Yeah, just for extra help for these kids.
Extra help, after we see those report, that reinforcement that they need. Anything that we saw that's in the red, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, Ms. Boyd.
Yvonne, are you guys on the district math, or you're using Sharon Wells?
We do not use Sharon Wells.
Okay, so there, because the units are a little bit longer, then that's why you have a little bit more leeway.
Yes, I know that's something we talked about. We were talking about maybe going into Sharon Wells, but we just felt like with the need of our school, like we needed to have that leeway because a lot of our kids have a lot of gaps. And so we felt Sharon Wells would be too fast paced for our kids, and that's kind of how we did it.
Okay.
Although we did do stations with Sharon Wells, it was very tough to do, but we did incorporate it. It wasn't as detailed as what you're seeing, but we did do it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So Yvonne, what I see from this is that you're really digging deep at the student level data. Because if you just look at overall, if you were just to approach the TEAC, right, I could imagine you're just teaching the TEAC at level. And when you have like your first graders that don't even recognize and understand the value of each number, I mean, this is going to go a long way into everything else you do. So I can see the connections with the building of the math concepts. The other thing is, I like that you show the kids how to do these or the process in different formats. And I liked hearing you say which method works best for you, because we need to not give a one size or a one way fits for every child, but allow them to have that voice and feedback to us to say, this is what works. This is exactly what feedback from students looks like. Um, and then you talked about having at least that one tiered station
Yes.
that is really addressing, and again, what you use this year for your tier one, tier two, and tier three, if I'm getting this correct, might look different next year based on your error analysis, right? Because your students might look very different. Okay.
Yes. So, like I said, I have a folder of a lot of ones that we made last year, but some of them we haven't even used yet because that's not what we needed right now. I'm not saying we're not going to use them. We will use them, but when we need them, when they come up.
Right. And again, using student data at the frequency distribution, right? Looking
Yeah.
at your frequency distribution, because it's not that we're teaching to the star and because that's what's highly tested, but if it is highly tested, my rationale is if it's highly tested, it's that important to
Absolutely,
that
yes.
grade level. And so we do have to give it, its due diligence in making sure that the students achieve level of mastery. And again, it's not the other thing I really loved when I spoke to you yesterday is you gave the assessment, the kids got a percentage of mastery, which was not good at all. And so you didn't say, well, we already gave the test, we're moving on. So you said, okay, we are moving on, right? Through, like you said, your whole group instruction, but we're still going to circle back to make sure that these kids get these standards to the level of mastery. And so those are the things that they really stood out to me yesterday as I was speaking to you about this. So I love the way you all are doing this.
Thank you.
So, and then the time, like you said, you've created some last year that you haven't used yet, but you have them in a bank, right? So how do you house those? Tell me about that.
We have a drive folder and it's in my classroom for the teachers to be able to access. So they have them.
So
But
you're archiving them or saving them based on the TEAC, right? So
yes,
here's TEAC
yes, we have
5.3 and here's
so the folder's titled tiered interventions, but then we have a folder by grade level, and then every grade level we have a TEAC. So that's where we have it. So in some TEACs we have multiple activities. So I'll kind of go back to that. We also want to make sure things are working. So this was last year. We want to be reflective. We made one for it's 5.4G, which is simplify numerical expressions. We made it as best as we thought we could make it. The kids were not successful. We did another assessment. Kids' data still came out low. So we had to create another one because that's also something that's highly tested. We created a whole other new tier based off of what we saw, and the data went up to, I want to say, and thinking of the numbers off the top of my head, but at first it was like 20 something percent last year. We ended with, on our assessment, like a 70 something on that 5.4G after having that reflection. So we don't just like want to move on. It's more than just, giving them activity to do. We have to provide the scaffolding for the kids, and especially with all the gaps that we have right now.
And so you touched on two more very valuable points, I think, in a campus and in grade levels, right? In your teams, is that you have to work together to make the work doable.
Yes.
And so sharing the load of, okay, you create the tier one, I'll create the tier two, the tier three, and you're splitting up the work that way. But the second thing, Yvonne, that was so powerful is you said our data was not moving. And so we knew we had to change it up until we found what worked for our kids. So being so reflective and not saying, well, these kids, they just don't get it and giving up, right? Which we never do, but saying, you know what, the way we're doing this isn't working for our kids. And so we need to do something different. And then you finally hit the nail on the head, and your data is what drove. So that's why this is so powerful at the student level of data. And so that's why I think this is a great system you all have set up at Ascaraten. And as you're mentioning right now, the data is showing that it does produce that student success that you're looking for. So great.
It's helped our students out a lot. It's been really helpful to our kids.
Wow. I also like that you said in the lower grades, the kids have to get their hands on things. So you create the stations that are maybe more offline than online. And so good. Great. And so do your upper grade kids also have some opportunities or some points where they manipulate and use whatever the concrete model?
Yes, so like on that tier one I shared with third grade, on the folder, they have a worksheet. So I worked on it, so that one was mine. They have a worksheet where they have the little 10 frame place value chart, and then they have to use the counters physically. So it's like an extension of what they had on the Nearpod.
Oh, okay. I like that.
So yes.
Any other questions or comments? Oh, Mr. Gonzalez has raised his hand.
Yeah, I just wanted a clarification. We talked a little bit about how you said that maybe Sharon Wells had too many things for you to be able to kind of work it with your plan. Did you do blended learning while you were doing Sharon Wells?
And actually, I'm trying to remember when we started. We started last year, so no. Last year was the first year we didn't. So we had been using Sharon Wells for a while. So no, we were just doing just stations, like our traditional stations. We were doing it with Sharon Wells, and it was even hard in that sense also. So I can understand Ms. Boyd's question, how do we fit this in with all of those components, Sharon Wells has. It's very fast paced. Yeah, it's a little bit of a challenge. I don't have answers for that one of how that could look like, but that's something to think about for sure.
Okay, thank you.
And so, see, and that's a great question, Mr. Gonzalez and Ms. Castillo, very honest. That is the question. See, how do we make this process fit with what we are currently using as our resources? And I think you all at Parkland Elementary has started to get creative on how to do that. And so I think with what you're doing, because I know Ms. Boyd and y'all's team has explained that to me of how you're finding ways to, let's say, like your skills, to put that at a station. Just the monitoring piece needs to be there. How can you tier problem of the day? Not all students need all your support. Can they do it through peer collaboration? And then we just check in. Can our concept development be done on a Monday and then followed with station rotations on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, with assessment and conferencing on Friday? So we have to again, remember, our learning is a lot on how do we take what we're learning, what we're learning from each other, and apply it to our context, the resources we have, and your professionalism, your innovation, and your creativity. So that is going to be key. And I know y'all at Parkland are going to be the ones to unlock that door. Right, Ms. Boyd? Right, Mr. Gonzalez?
No, and
Yep.
it's like you said, from what I remember, what we did, and like we didn't do tiered back then, but we did have to take something out to put that station rotation in. And we just had to be very honest with what we could take out. Like we couldn't take out, like our skills review, because some of those things are new. We had to, do that with the kids. So I want to say we took out our basic facts, and I don't remember, and we had to cut down times so that we had enough time to have small group, because that was so important to meet small group with the kids. Like that was something we didn't want to let go of. So we did do it. So I see it as doable, but I know you might not have as much time for stations as we have, but I can see it fitting in.
And I think, Yvonne, if we focus more on the 6 weeks test rather than the weekly test, that's the piece of data that we can use for stations, because those are still new concepts that the students are learning each week. And then once they have their 6 weeks test, then those can become your stations for 6 weeks to be able to see. But you have to make sure that you're mastering, or excuse me, that you're assessing to make sure that the students are grasping those. So rather than us trying to be able to do it each week, that it just needs to be the 6 weeks test. We look at that data, which we did most of us today during PLC, and then we can base our stations through the 6 weeks test. That's just an idea. I think that's attainable for us.
No, I agree. I agree with that, because what we usually do is we do like a unit, right? So our units are smaller than the 6 weeks, but it would contain 3 or 4 different concepts. So it's kind of similar. So I think that would be good.
The other thing is that Sharon Wells does allow for you to have those weekly assessments, right? So I mean, it speaks to two things: that our tier one instruction has to be very powerful, because if not, you're going to be killing yourself once you get that 6 weeks, that cumulative assessment, right? If the tier 1 instruction wasn't strong. But those unit assessments weekly give you some great quick data on how that specific, or that cluster of TEKs went that week. And if you see one that just didn't go the way you wanted it to, I mean, that one you can right away impact the instruction the following week in a station, and you can already start to look at that student level data to see, okay, what went wrong. And I think that especially that's what I like about what Yvonne spoke about, because they really are doing the error, and they're looking at student work, right? Because if they didn't look at the student work at the student level data, they wouldn't have that information about, what, it's a matter of the computation. It's a matter of they didn't understand. It's a comprehension issue. It's a vocabulary issue. They didn't know the vocabulary that was used in the assessment. So it could be many things. And until we look at it at that level, and then I think you mentioned doing that at your campus is looking at assessments, correct? Looking at the student assessments, making those analysis. You're on mute, Ms. Castillo. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I forgot I took it off. Yes, we get like higher grades, usually 3 to 6. So we get like 2 of the higher, 3 of like in the middle, and then 2 students who performed on the lower end to see what they're doing.
Ms. Valdez, you have a question?
Well, I just wanted to say, because I mean, I'm one of the teachers that's using Sharon Wells, and what I'm learning, but I've noticed that what I started doing is I'm using the skills as my guided math. So it's kind of the way I'm bringing my kids over to my table. I'm working on skills, and then it allows me to see what they do and don't know, and then I can support them then and there. So there's some kids that and I let them collaborate, and I'm listening, and I can see right away the ones that are ready to move, and they're remembering stuff from first grade. And what I'm liking too is that the Sharon Wells supports the concept that you're already teaching. So like right now that we just started fractions in the second book, it's reviewing fractions that they should have seen somewhat in first grade. So it allows me to kind of see like, okay, these kids are remembering, these kids are not remembering, as much as I can support them right then and there. I've noticed that in the few weeks I've been doing it, it's kind of been helping my kids to just build that confidence with, whatever math they're doing at that moment. And then as far as like the fast pace of Sharon Wells, if you're just focusing on the one need, the one TEK that the whole class needs, and you're gonna make a station and implement it for 3 weeks, I don't see how that can't be done, because you're just focusing on the one station, and you're putting that in, and the rest is going to probably be technology or their daily practice, like those basic facts or something else that you're going to ask them to do either hands-on or on paper that's going to support their learning of the concept.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. I'm glad you said that about it's doable, because that's what we wanted to do for the teachers and of course the students. We want to do what's best for students, but when I meet with teachers, I also say I want it to work for you too, because I want the teacher's going to have to implement it. So this is something that the teacher saw as doable, because it's one thing that we're going to work on. It's not something I have to make every single week. And instead of just like, okay, every student has different needs, and we're trying to work on those things too, but are those scaffolded, those needs also? We want to provide that scaffold. So if we provide that scaffold for that one standard and move on, it's like we're chipping away at the needs, and we're going to at least get good at that one thing and move on.
Right.
It's impossible.
You're addressing one need at a time, because it's impossible to address every single need.
Exactly.
I mean, we go baddies. So I think we just need to, remember that, like address the one need one at a time, so.
It's really worked for us. It's really helped our students, especially last year. Now we're in that process again. So, I'm sure we're going to see the same. Ms. Osuna, I wanted to just very quickly show you my folder. I know you had asked about it. This is kind of like what it looks like. I'm still missing some of the activities. I'm trying to put them all in, but it's just a folder. It's in my classroom, but it's, let me go back. This is the It's every grade level. This is more of what we saw last year. So you'll see, like, I'm going to go to 5th grade because that has a little bit more. Here you can see 5.4F version 1. That's what I was talking about. We did that first. And that's how, after seeing that data, we saw, we need to do something else. And so then there's a version 2. We had them go back and do it, but we did it with a different activity, different supports, and it really helped the kids. But all of these are more like more digital because of everything that happened last year. But we intend to use them and kind of change it up somehow by adding that video. But we did start to add the supports with the anchor charts, but and you can see like the assessments here that the kids would then be taking, but this would be like coordinate planes. We got very savvy with the technology last year, so this is more of what it used to look like. I did add the video on this one to kind of show the teachers a transition, but it didn't have the video before. It's going to take a little while to load, but this is one that was created last year. So I did add the video. Video wasn't there last year, but then it has the kids practice because we saw our tier 1 kids needed the support with the decimals. How do I plot the decimal points based on the data? That's where it was at. And so they have more practice on that. But our folder looks like that. It has all of these different standards to look. And those are the ones we worked on last year. All of these are more digital based. I don't have everything in there though. It was kind of hard to put everything together that we did, but that's what that folder looks like.
And that's an example, Yvonne, of using what we learned during the time of COVID, right? That we can use videos. You can allow, in the teacher empowerment on using what works for them. They can use Google Slides, they can use Nearpod, they can use a form. And so a lot of voice and choice on both the part of the students and the teachers. So great, that's great resources. And again, you're building up your bank of resources, yes. Right? So when you don't find that YouTube video that fits exactly the way you want to teach it and to the level of the TEK, right, then you record yourself. So great job. This is awesome.
And I know we try to support the teachers as much as we can. So we had another training on screencastify just Monday. And of course, some teachers hadn't used it, even though we did talk about it last year. So it was showing them how to use it, but then how can we use it in our instruction? So we gave them examples, like you can use it as, a flip, you can put it as your instructions. And after you can use your document camera and you can record a video. And so after we had that training, we actually, when you were here, Miss Osuna, going into our 6th grade class, one of the teachers had that. She had her video for her stations for science, and she had a screencastify video explaining, and she had just recorded it that morning. So it's just offering the teachers the tools, giving them the support to be able to do it. And right. She even said, I did it in 3 minutes. It was so easy, giving the teachers the power to do it and helping them and giving them support.
Right. Also working on one thing at a time, right? Let's just get the hang of screencastify and how we can use it in the classroom.
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. Any more questions or comments? It's exactly 5:30. Great job, Ms. Castillo. Y'all, I talked to her about this yesterday morning and asked her to present today because I was like, we've got to share these great ideas that you all have. And so this is what it's all about. I know Ms. Boyd has often said, we need to keep sharing. We need to stop reinventing the wheel. And so I thank you so much, Ms. Castillo, for sharing on the fly, because I just asked you yesterday and look what a great job you did today. Thank you so much for sharing everything that y'all are doing and just your honesty and openness about your cycle of iteration and what you've done to make sure your students are successful. Great job. We look for great things happening there.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Y'all help me thank her so much. Great job. Thank you, Ms. Castillo. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you for joining us today.
I just have a quick question for you, Ms. Osuna, before I sign off.
Yes, ma'am. Let me stop recording.